Number 1. Uncle Charlie's. This is my mother's story. Although my Uncle Charlie died when I was 7 years old, I do have very pleasant memories of him. He was a nice and pleasant man, and he was Uncle Charlie to everyone, whether he was your uncle or not. He was married to my great-aunt Sybil, so he was technically my uncle. I also remember his house. They lived out in the country. The house was on the side of a hill with a gravel driveway. If you were in the house at night, you would always know when a car pulled up in the driveway, because you would hear the crunching on the gravel and see the headlights shining into the house. My mom's cousin Roger was like her best friend. They did a lot of things together. Some thought Roger may have been a little crazy or lying when he told them about an experience he had in the house. He was home alone at night. He heard the crunching of the gravel in the driveway as a car was driving up the driveway. After a moment, he then noticed the headlights coming up the driveway. He heard someone get out of their car and walk up to the house. However, no one actually came inside the house. He was confused and went outside, thinking that something was wrong. When he got out there, he didn't see anyone, and there was no car in the driveway. He would have known if the car had left, even if its headlights did not come on. He would hear it driving on the gravel, but there was nothing. Well, needless to tell you, this scared the crap out of him. Not only that, but no one really believed him either. He was a teenager, and you know how people often think teenagers just make things up for attention. Even my mom, who was great friends with him, didn't really believe him. And then one evening, my mom was over at the house with Roger. As I mentioned, they were very good friends, and it wasn't abnormal for people in my family in that area to go out and leave the kids at home alone. At nighttime, they were watching TV with the lights off. They were in the living room, and that was when both of them heard the crunching of tires driving up the gravel driveway. As usual, this was followed by the headlights shining into the window. They shone, and then when the car stopped, they went out. There was the sound of somebody getting out of the car and slamming the door. This time, they heard the person walking around the side of the house. They then heard the side door of the house being opened and then shut. Footsteps then walked down the hallway into the bathroom down the hall. And they waited for a moment or so, but they did not hear anything else. They wondered, of course, what was going on. So they got up and went down the hall to see who it was that had come home. It could have been Uncle Charlie. It could have been a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, or anyone. This was on a weekend, and it was not unusual for all sorts of relatives to come to Uncle Charlie's home. And generally, everyone just let themselves in. But there was no one in the house at all. The side door of the house was locked. They went over to the front window to look out into the driveway. There was no car in the driveway. There was no one out there and no indication that anyone had been out there. Worry set into both of them. They went outside and called and looked around, wondering if a family member was playing a joke on them, but they found no one. Scared, going back into the house, my mom absolutely believed Roger now. They turned on the lights and locked all the doors and waited for Uncle Charlie to come home. Number 2. Shadow. On one of KOC's streams, I heard him talking about having partial seizures. I thought it was brave to talk about that, because I had them too, but I don't like bringing it up. I guess it makes me feel weak or something, but I wanted to share my story about it. I've had epilepsy my entire life. Although full seizures are rare, they do happen. But partial seizures are more common, even when I have been taking my medicine. Most of them are accompanied by auditory hallucinations, but there are some visual ones as well. The one that I always get more often, visually, was of the shadow figure. I don't really know what else to call it than that. It was a dark, filled-in shape of a person, more or less. I tended to see the shadow person when I was more likely having a migraine or something like that. But I got used to it after a while, and it stopped scaring me very much. I didn't really mention it to many people, other than my family. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I don't like really talking about my epilepsy too much. When I was about 13 years old, we had moved to a new neighborhood, about a year before this story took place. It was hard making new friends, mostly because the people who lived in that area had known each other for a really long time. So I very much felt like I was on the outside, trying to find a place to fit in. I lucked out, and that around the time my family moved to that area, another boy my age did too. Since we had problems making friends with the other people, we both became pretty good friends. I had been dealing with the partial seizures for some time by the time that we had become friends. His name is Alex, by the way. Although I didn't tell too many people about it, I did make sure that he knew. We spent enough time together that in case I had a full seizure or something, it was something that he should know about. But other than that, we never talked about it. Alex and I both had sleepovers at each other's houses pretty often too. It was necessary, because we played so many video games, and often well into the night, that it was just normal for us to fall asleep in the room we were in at some point. After about 6 months, from the time that Alex and I had become friends, we were in my room playing video games. My parents were both asleep long before either of us fell asleep. I don't recall how late it was before I dozed off on my bed. I was woken up, though, by Alex shaking me awake. He must have turned the game system off after I passed out, because it was dark in the room. I was very groggy and I tried to get my bearings, but I found it very hard to do so. "What's going on?" I asked him, still half asleep. Alex tried to tell me something, but then he stopped. He tried to tell me a few times, but for some reason he kept stopping, before telling me what was wrong. "Alex, are you okay?" I asked, now getting concerned. I don't even know how to bring this up," he began. His voice was hesitant, and I could tell he was very afraid. "Tell me what?" I asked. I think your house is haunted," he told me. That was definitely not what I had been expecting to hear from him. "Why would you think that?" I asked him. "Well, I went to the bathroom about 5 minutes ago, and when I turned on the light, I saw a shape standing behind the shower curtain," he told me. "I don't know how else to describe it, but it was as if a shadow was standing up on its own." Well, of course that surprised me. When I asked him to elaborate, he described, in essence, the shadow person that I had been seeing for years. This was something that I had never told him about, and always thought he was simply a hallucination caused by my seizures. My family had never seen him, and I knew they would not have told Alex about it. Hell, even if they had, I still knew Alex was telling the truth. His fear alone told me that. What really struck me as odd is that the Shadow Man was something I'd seen in the home before the one Alex saw him in. So if it is a ghost and not a hallucination, then it somehow followed me from one home to the other. I still live at home, and I've seen him a few times since. However, there's now a dread associated with him that I had never had before. I'll be going off to college soon, and living in a dorm room, and I have to wonder if he will follow me again. Number 3. The night I became a ghost. Many people may be familiar with the concept of astral travel. Supposedly, this is the ability to separate one's astral body, the Only other way I think to express it is the soul from one's body, so that the soul can take spirit journeys to other realms, while one's body is left safely at home. Shamans in many human cultures throughout history have presumably trained themselves to take such journeys regularly in order to gain occult knowledge or insight about the future, about a person's health, or perhaps to take a peek at other dimensions. There also have been reports of spontaneous astral travel, where the event just happens to a person without their conscious control. People who experience near-death experiences often report their souls rising up, looking down and seeing their bodies lying below them. I once had no opinions about astral travel, one way or the other. I neither believed it nor disbelieved in it. I simply didn't know. Then an experience happened to me one night. It started out much like any other night, except that I felt more tired than usual, and had decided to retire early. I recall it was a lovely winter night, very close to the Yuletide, and a gentle snow was falling outside. I snuggled down in bed to listen to my favorite YouTube channel, preparing myself for sleep. I felt very comfortable, and was just drifting off, when I felt an unaccustomed lifting, a sense of weightlessness. I felt as though I were floating and suspended in air, rather than sinking into the oblivion of a consciousness, as usual, and that my consciousness had shifted. I was hyper-alert, more even than when in a waking state. I opened my eyes, and lo and behold, I found myself floating near the ceiling, looking down at my inert body, peacefully lying in bed, faintly illuminated by the glow of my laptop screen. I marveled at this situation. I had not sought this. I had not expected it. It was just happening without any effort on my part. Oddly, I felt no fear, none at all. I just assumed that I was dreaming. Was this what people call a lucid dream? Is so-called astral travel and so-called lucid dreaming one and the same? I had no idea. I just found myself, with some part of myself, marveling at the experience. Two things I remember with a sense of weightlessness and the lack of any physical discomfort. I felt buoyant and light and rather excited by it all. I also felt a strong desire to leave, to fly, to spread my wings as it were. The nearby window beckoned me, and before I knew it, I was on the other side of it. Opening it had not been necessary. All I knew was that I was free. I didn't feel the coldness of the winter air at all, but I was flying very swiftly through it, flying very swiftly indeed, as if with the power of a single thought. Soon I found myself over a vast dark ocean. The water looked very cold and unbroken as far as my eyes could see. Soon I reached land again, and found myself in a town. It wasn't any town I was familiar with. The houses seemed strange. They looked old. They were all covered with the same wooden clapboard siding, stained deep brown and unpainted. All these buildings were close together, attached in fact, as townhouses are. Some of the buildings had 3 or 4 floors, others were lower, but they were all attached. I don't know why, but I got the impression I might be in a Scandinavian country, although I've never been to Scandinavia. The night was very dark and it seemed very cold, although I couldn't feel it, and flakes of snow were drifting about in the air. I found myself being drawn to one particular lighted window among this pile of buildings, one of the taller houses. Before I knew it, I was through this window and inside. It became immediately apparent to me that a big party was going on. A holiday party, as it was to Yule. There was much light, laughter, and chatting. People were moving about, sitting or standing with drinks in their hands. They all were dressed very nicely. I specifically remember a tall, attractive blond man leaning against a counter that separated the wide entrance hall from an open concept kitchen living room area where many other people were. This man was wearing a lovely knitted jumper or sweater, He was holding a drink and chatting with another man. I moved closer to these people, only to realize that they had no cognizance of me at all. I even waved a hand before their faces and they didn't react. Clearly I was entirely invisible to them. I was, in essence, a ghost. I didn't overly marvel at this interesting situation. I more or less accepted it and began moving from room to room, exploring the house. What amazed me more was how vivid everything seemed. I could discern every detail of my surroundings, the furnishings, the people, the activity, the sounds. I recall that one room was filled with toys. After making a circuit of the downstairs rooms, I came out once more into the wide entrance hall, which included a wide staircase of dark hardwood, balustraded, with the same on both sides. The wood was rather scuffed and worn with age, but the whole house, although it clearly was older, was very well appointed and comfortable. It had good vibes. 2 children sat on the stairs, a boy and a girl, looking between 8 and 10 years old. They were chatting and playing, happily, and also were dressed in their holiday best. The girl wore a bright red dress with white lace trim. The boy wore blue slacks and a jumper. I approached them with the idea of moving beyond them, and hence up the stairway to explore the upstairs. But at this point, something rather shocking happened. The little girl looked up, and suddenly her eyes focused right on me. Her eyes widened, her entire face filled with utter terror, and before I knew it, she emitted a piercing scream. When this all happened so fast, I remember thinking, "Do you mean that you can actually see me?" Because all the adults could not. For some reason, obviously, I was visible to this girl. In an instant, I felt myself being pulled back. It was rather like the sensation I imagine a telescope might feel when it's being retracted. The entire scene before me collapsed. I was back in bed and awake, with the voice from my laptop droning away next to me. The experience remains for me one of the most profound that I could perhaps label as paranormal, although it was very much different than most that you hear about. Usually a narrator recalls an experience of seeing a ghost, often when they were a child. In this instance, it was I who was the ghost. It is perfectly natural, I suppose, for people to react with fear and shock when they suddenly see someone or something that shouldn't be there. I suspect I might feel just the same. But I wonder if every encounter of this sort need be seen as malevolent. Perhaps many so-called ghosts are merely what I was on that particular winter night. An unexpected soul traveler who finds themselves gypsying in places just as strange to them as they may seem to the rare and gifted person capable of detecting their presence. Since this time, I have begun a course of self-training, and today I am capable of taking astral or lucid soul journeys at will. I have been many places and met many interesting people on these journeys, and have gained much insight that I would call profound, but I have never encountered the little girl in the red dress again. My experiences thus far have shifted my former view of what I define as supernatural. Maybe someday such experiences will become perfectly natural. Maybe someday we will recognize ghosts as just fellow souls who, voluntarily or involuntarily, are having a go at parting some interdimensional curtain. And if we catch sight of someone peeking in at us, we can just wave and say, "Hello."
That is black and white. Candles to light. Alright. Are you ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Christina. I started to call her Big X. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Thank you. Hey, got a video.
Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I hope you enjoyed these stories. I particularly liked the ending of the last one. It seemed more spiritual than scary to me until the little girl screamed. I mean, that just freaked me out a little bit. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell below. Or wait for the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.